A question that comes up from time to time when handling third-party messages is whether it is lawful for the station to relay the message. The question usually arises because the station that has accepted the traffic or is in the process of relaying the traffic doesn't understand what they're looking at. So, when we take a look at a couple of examples, we can walk through what we see and whether this actually constitutes encryption or obfuscation of the meaning as prohibited by the rules of amateur radio. First of all, let's take a look at the rule. The rule itself is actually in 47 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 97.113, paragraph A4. The text is messages encoded for the purpose of obscuring their meaning as one of the examples of prohibited transmissions. In this case, the relay station does not need to understand the meaning of the message. There is no rule that requires that somebody who's reading the message completely understands it. What the rule forbids is the use of one word for another or some kind of a code that would mean somebody reading the message doesn't understand or is being misdirected as to the meaning. In the case of a communication that is personal, of course there are going to be details in there. When it refers to Martha or Sally or Bob, we're not necessarily going to understand the relationship of all of these people to one another. We're not going to understand the significance of what it means by somebody's recent procedure, for example. But the fact is that those messages mean exactly what they have written. It's very different from if we are using the word chickens instead of referring to radios, or we have some kind of another encoding means that is going to obscure or hide or otherwise change the meaning. There are plenty of examples where we do pass messages that do not have all of the information contained in them for somebody to understand them. As an example, the American Radio Relay League has its numbered radiograms. It is perfectly lawful for us to pass a radiogram that has the text ARL50. Now, that's not obfuscation, even though it does require that somebody has to go look up what that meaning is. This is well-established amateur procedure, and these are published all over the web, so there is nothing hidden about the meaning here. This simply makes it possible, and in fact easier, for us to be able to relay messages whenever we mean to say greetings by amateur radio. So the question is, if you receive a radiogram for relay and you do not understand the contents, does that violate the rules of amateur radio? There is no requirement that every station understands the content of the message. What is prohibited is the encoding or the creation of a message in such a way that its intent is to obscure the meaning of the message. That's something that can be handled only by the originating station or by the originator, the author of the message, and by the recipient, the addressee. The amateurs in the middle don't necessarily need to understand all of what they're looking at for it to be perfectly legal under the rules of amateur radio. Happy relay. This is KD8TTE out.